Hello again. My name is Ani. Um, New angle unlocked. The sun's gonna set pretty soon, so I was like, hey, it might be cool to have in the background. But also, the sun isn't really out, so having the sun angle wasn't gonna work, so I was like, fuck it, whatever. I'll put my phone on my laptop, and we'll call it a day. And we'll have some nice light in the background, I guess. Um, so, yesterday, or 2 days ago, or whenever my last video was, I mentioned I was going to talk about psychosis, but I was kind of thinking about it and I was like, well, I can't really mention psychosis without talking about why that's even on the table, which is BPD and my experience with BPD. So I thought, hey, you know what? We'll talk about BPD today. I tried to record this once and I just fucking fumbled. So I wrote down a few pointers. So if I'm like looking at my crotch, I'm really looking at the back of my journal where I wrote this down. I wrote down a few bullet points I want to get to, but I'm gonna try and keep it organic, or at least do the best I can. So first things first. I don't have any statistics written down. I don't have any scientific evidence I'm gonna bring up. If you really want to know, you can go ahead and look it up. But I'm not going to bring that to the table right now. I'm just going to focus on my experience and what I know about my BPD, if that makes sense. I'm also going to try and say things as plainly as I can, just because I feel since BPD is so kind of misconstrued online that people aren't really sure what it means to have BPD. So I'm just, I'm gonna state things very plainly. It could be uncomfortable, topic-wise. I'm just gonna say things as they are, and that's gonna be that. So, I hope you're ready for a long one. This is gonna be, this is gonna be a doozy. So, I guess I'll start with, what is BPD? BPD stands for borderline personality disorder. The borderline in BPD is referencing the line that splits up normal people and psychotic people with psychotic disorders, which that's a whole other thing. But borderline sits pretty in the middle. Some people experience more psychotic symptoms, some people don't. It tends to have a spectrum. Usually when, at least from what I've heard, psychologists they have a criteria. There's 8 criteria that you have to meet in order to be considered somebody with borderline. And you have to meet 5, I think. I don't know if I said that already. I'm literally my brain is going 1,000 miles a minute. This is low-key stressful, by the way. This is something I want to talk about, but getting it across is what I'm worried about. Where I want it to come through right, because it's one of the disorders that is the most difficult to deal with, and it is so misconstrued online, as I already said, where I'm really concerned about just saying things right. So fuck, we're gonna ball. So BPD is usually caused by childhood trauma. It can also be genetic. So, if you have a grandmother with BPD, you might have it too. Or you have at least a bigger chance of getting it. Because, I said I wasn't going to bring up scientific evidence, but here I am. They did studies on brains of people with borderline, and literally our brain structures are different than a normal human brain. So, genetically you could just literally develop that kind of brain where, I don't know the specifics, I don't know. But yeah, genetically you could get that brain, or because of childhood experience, that literally changes how your brain looks. You could get it through early childhood. For me, I don't fucking know. All I know is that I have it, and it super sucks. So, living with borderline. Well, let's talk about, like, what even is it? As I said, it's a personality disorder. It's not a mood disorder. It's not. What are the other ones? Fucking. I'm sure if you're even remotely interested in this, you kind of understand what a personality disorder is. They are, like, it's not curable. As compared to depression, which you can remedy via pills and medication, which can then lead to a cure. Like, people can stop being depressed, or people can stop having anxiety, you know? But when you have a personality disorder, it is so innate to, like, literally, it is the shape of my brain. You can't change that. So, hence personality, it's just, you can't get rid of it. And that's kind of one of the suckiest parts. But I'll talk about symptoms, I guess. Personally, through my experience, the symptoms I get the most are dissociative episodes where I can, after a really stressful event, I will completely just, like, my POV will suck into the back of my head. It'll feel like I'm piloting who I am, if that makes sense. Like, it's not the third person POV, it's more of like I'm in the backseat of a car, but I'm still looking through the front windshield, if that makes sense. I'll get that every now and again after a really stressful experience. Sorry, my hair's pissing me off. That's a big one. That led into the psychosis that I'm going to touch on later. Another big one is being really triggered by abandonment. That's the one that's said online, I think, the most. Where I will do anything to avoid real or perceived abandonment. Where if I feel like someone's backing off, I will freak the fuck out. I will, like, claw to get back to that person. And it could just be like, oh, they got busy. Like, oh, they picked up more hours at work. But to me, that's like, oh, you're trying to get more distance away from me. See? It's all up here. But that's a big one. It also has very extreme mood swings where you can go from elated, like so happy, like you could cry tears of joy, to angry or to sad or to empty in a couple days to minutes. Like, it can be super snappy as to how people with BPD shift. It's called splitting. I guess technically for anger it's called splitting. I don't know if it's the same for other emotions, but I don't know. I just live with it. I just work here. But yeah, that's another big one. There's some other ones like suicidal ideation or suicidal threats. There's other stuff. I literally am blanking. I'm sure I'll get to some as I'm talking about it, but that's like the general idea of what the condition is. Just so we're clear. Okay. So, after this I wrote daily life with BPD. Every day is exhausting. And it's not like, oh, I work so hard. Like, oh, I'm just so tired. No. Every day is emotionally exhausting because I feel every emotion so, like, raw. Like, this I'll get into. It stems from childhood, but every emotion I feel is like it's the only emotion I've ever felt. It's all encompassing. Like, I can feel completely empty. Like, there's not, like, I've lost my soul. That can be one of the emotions that I feel, or lack of. I can feel so angry that I could just destroy everything around me and not care. I can feel so happy that I could do anything. Like, I could give a TED Talk for an hour. I could run a fucking marathon. Like, in minutes of each other. I could go from this to this to this to this. And the effect that has on your brain is gonna result in I'm so fucking tired all the time. And that, I think, is one of the suckiest parts about it, is just constant noise. There's constantly noise in my head of just every emotion in the book. It's a lot. And then on top of that, you're supposed to be able to act like a normal human being the whole time. So a lot of it is then you have to learn to mask it, which can be really hard, because then people like pry and prod and they're like, oh, are you actually okay? And I get that a lot. And then that can very quickly turn to anger. And part of my experience growing up is learning how to ignore the urge to split on people. We'll talk about that later. But, yeah. So, early childhood, that's, I think that's where I'm gonna go next. I had a therapist for a little bit. Well, I've had two therapists that I think I've talked about this with. And a lot of what I'm learning about myself has to stem from early childhood. I grew up, I mentioned this last time, in a religious school. It was very strict. So from that, I kind of just learned, like, I have to keep feelings to myself. I have to keep a lot to myself, actually, or else I'm gonna get yelled at, or I'm gonna go to the principal. And I was already told, stranger danger, and, like, to not disobey authority at all, ever. So, that also led into social anxiety later. But, a lot of that, I just kept everything in here. Like, I kept my mouth fucking shut. So, I didn't express anything. It was all in here. And eventually, when a kid, I heard this, I forget where I heard this, someone said this, but one of the biggest things about BPD is that in order to develop this, you have to give a kid so much and not remedy it for so long that they have no other choice. And that's kind of where BPD stems from. So, a lot of my early childhood, I was keeping things to myself. I would get hurt. I would keep it to myself. I wouldn't tell anybody. I would, just a lot of stuff. Okay, sorry. That's the first time I think I'm ever gonna cut on this channel, but, there's a cool storm outside that you'll probably hear. What was I talking about? Yeah, I had to keep a lot to myself growing up. And I also just didn't get the opportunity to bring my emotions up with people, especially my parents, because they just weren't around. Big thing in my family is nicotine addiction. They were cigarette smokers for a long time. And that, when you have to smoke a cigarette, you gotta step outside. And, my parents would only get together or be available if they weren't working or watching TV or, whatever. That's the only time they would get up and be available. So my only window to talk to them was when they were already walking out the door. So I never got to talk about how I felt about things. Which, nowadays, I don't know how to talk about my feelings. So, we're learning. There was also a very big injustice aspect to my early life. Not because anything crazy happen to me, you know. But I just felt like a lot of stuff that did shouldn't have, and a lot of stuff that did never got remedied or rectified or whatever the word is. A good example was my first babysitter. She was not a nice woman. She very like really favored my older brother, and as a result, I would do something very minor and I would get screamed at and I would get things taken away just because I was like, one of the things that I did was I was playing with a really, like, a way younger kid than me. I think they were probably 2. I was 4 or 5 or something, so I guess not really that much younger. But we were playing with this dollhouse, and I, like, tried to, like, move something, and it, like, pinched their little finger because I didn't see it. And they started, like, crying, and I was like, oh my god, I'm so sorry. Like, I was, like, profusely apologizing to this kid, and then this fucking bitch walks over. You can see BPD in real time. Hey, listen. You saw that. Anyway, sorry. Whatever. This bitch walks over, and she's, like, screaming at me. Bah, 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 bah. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I was, like, trying to apologize. Like, blah, blah, blah. And then I had to sleep on the fucking floor. I hated her. My brother did too. I don't think she favored him, but I don't think, by much. So, yeah, it's just stuff like that. And then she never really apologized to me or to my family or anything. So I'll just kind of have to live with it. So I guess the bottom line was, because I couldn't really make friends growing up just because I was so shy, I couldn't talk to people about my feelings and about, like, not being able to make friends. I was just isolated. I was left with too much, and I just had to deal with it myself. So, in response, my brain changed. So now I'm here. And it super sucks, by the way. So, yeah. Well, the thing with BPD, like, you don't see these symptoms show up, immediately upon birth. At least usually you don't. For me, it took probably until 10 or 12 for them to really start appearing. And the biggest emotion that appeared was anger. Anger was the first thing that I really snapped on. There was a situation, I'm not going to delve into it because age is old and people are involved and I just don't want to, tell the whole story that is only my perspective about it. But there was a situation with an ex-friend, where I thought something was happening because my brain was doing that for whatever reason. Was it happening? Maybe. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe she was just, looking up to me in some way. Who knows? I'm sorry I'm being vague. I just can't go into detail. But, I have a pen. I experienced BPD anger for the first time during this time. And maybe I mentioned this before, but emotions for people with BPD are very extreme. Anger is a really big one, at least for me. It's all-encompassing. It doesn't falter. It feels like it's the only emotion I've ever felt, and it feels like I need to do something or I'll blow up, Like, I feel like a ticking time bomb. So, a lot of being 12 was, and maybe some of it was puberty, but I still do get this anger. But anyway, dealing with it for the first time when I was 12. Look at those clouds, holy shit. It's so dark. Anyway, that's a crazy storm. Um, Dealing with those feelings when I was 12. They, Jesus, I never turn my notifications off because I'm dumb! But anyway, dealing with those feelings when I was 12. Sorry for saying it for the 5th time. I had no idea what I was doing. All I knew was I was very, very angry and that I wanted to do something about it. No one got hurt. I'll make that clear, no one got hurt. But BPD makes you go nuts. I'll tell you that. I would send threats of all shapes and sizes. I was stealing things. I was telling lies. I was doing everything to make this person's life hell. Because I felt like there was some sort of injustice. So I needed to do something. I needed to make it right. So I did what I could. And what I did was absolutely insane. Just absolutely crazy. And that was that. And then we weren't friends anymore. That was the first time I really experienced BPD rage, which I wish I could talk more eloquently, but it is just all-encompassing red. Like, all you see is red. Everybody is an enemy. It doesn't matter what they say or what they do when you're in this mood. Everybody is out to get you, and it's just survival. Like, you feel like everybody has done you wrong, and everybody needs to get this, like, righteous judgment. At least for me. I haven't felt that kind of anger in a very long time, thankfully, because I've learned to dodge it, but, it is still a very looming threat, much like these clouds. So, yeah, what the fuck else did I write down? This is like a really complex topic, I'm sorry. But after that situation with one of my friends, I kept getting into very spontaneous friendships. This is also a thing with BPD. You have very fleeting relationships, both romantic and platonic. And I would kind of go through the same pattern of, like, really friendship bombing somebody, and then I feel like they're doing something shitty, fucking righteous anger, and then done. That happened with a few people. And then I switched schools, and then I was like, I really gotta lock in on this, and I kind of did. I still had very fleeting friendships, not because I cut it off anymore, but because I just ran, which is becoming a new theme, of instead of having this kind of anger, I just run away from it, and I just don't acknowledge it. These clouds are fucking crazy. I told you this was gonna be awesome. Yeah, so really after that I was learning how to deal with this anger. Ooh, lightning. But another thing about growing up, I was also just horrendously depressed. So I was dealing with, and this plays into BPD as well, like, when nothing was happening, I was completely empty. And emptiness is a feeling that normal people don't get, at least I'm assuming. It is just like I lack a soul. Like I'm simply a shell. Like there's no feeling left. And it's very scary. Because you then feel like, oh, maybe I'm never going to feel anything again. Because another thing about BPD, you get black and white thinking, which is either everything is all good or everything is all bad. So if I'm really, really happy, feeling elated, everything's good, you know, everything is good. But if I'm suddenly sad, I can't be like, oh, I'll be happy again. Remember how happy I was? I'll be like, oh, I'm sad. I'm never going to be happy again. Which can be complicated. It can complicate things. So I was dealing with those sorts of thoughts a lot of the time when I was growing up, of either I'm happy and I have friends and everything's good, or my friends hate me, or I don't have anybody around, so I'm never gonna be okay again. Which, there's some darkness in there. I'm not gonna touch on it, but things were really shitty. And then I got to high school and things kind of evened out, at least a little bit, but my relationships got crazy. I also won't touch on that just because another person was involved, and I don't feel like really saying that on the internet, so whatever. That person also did something really, really bad to me, so we're just gonna leave it. So, yeah, which leads to now. I don't know if I mentioned, but I'm 21, so, not very far away from teenagehood. But my BPD nowadays, or at least pre-psychosis, was heavily, hell-bent on, abandonment. And, really trying to make sure that nobody abandons me. So I really, I was in a long-term relationship at the time. I was clawed onto this person for dear fucking life. And I made sure he knew. So I was like, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this. Because I was terrified. I was so scared of being abandoned because back in childhood, I was left alone with everything. And I didn't feel like I could talk to anybody. So if that happens, I then become the biggest threat to myself. And I don't want that. At least, back then. So I was doing fucking everything. And no matter how bad the relationship got, which it did, I didn't care. I was like, I'm gonna stay. Because I have to. It's just what BPD does to your brain. For some people it's different. For some people, at least I've heard, you don't even get that far. It's either, a lot of people it's 3 months only. That's the only relationship they can have is something 3 months long. Which, that was my case for a long time, but this was the first time it didn't, so I think that kind of added to the, I can't leave. I'm stuck. So, yeah. Then, we broke up, which is, at least my, at the time, biggest fear. It was really, really bad. I won't go into much detail about what happened. But it really was not good. It, as, a BPD brain, it made me flip through so many emotions all the time. I just wanted it to end, So, it was really just dealing with those feelings and trying to get away from it through any means. So a lot of it was being reckless. Trying to feel adrenaline. So reckless driving, drug use, alcohol misuse, everything under the sun. Hypersexuality. It was just trying to run away from it. Which then leads to how I got into a psychotic episode. The episode was a week long or so. It might have been a month. Honestly, time got real fucky. So, psychosis, for anyone who's not clear, it is built on a reality that you create. At least for me, I was living in a reality that I believed was real, but it, wasn't. I made it up. So what happened? This is kind of funny. I love Ethel Cain, as I mentioned. She had just released the album Perverts, which sent me spiraling. I still listen to the album today and I don't go into psychosis, but at the time it was like just really poor timing. So I listened to that album. I recommend it just because it's an experience. It sent me into psychosis, but it is a really good album. But I listened to the album and I was already like so high all the time. Like my brain just wasn't online. So I like it's kind of blurry how it started. But I just remember I was so obsessed with the sound of this album because it made me feel like I was already dead. This is okay. It's gonna get a little crazy from now on. It made it feel like I was already dead. So in my brain, I was then kind of believing that everything was becoming an omen. Like, I knew I was alive. I knew I wasn't dead. But it felt like I was gonna. Like, everything was a sign that I was gonna die. So, I'm sure I actually have, proof. But I would write, obsessively about, this music, and I would draw. I'm gonna read this for a second, so sorry if I get quiet. Just because I found the page, but I also wrote here. Actually, I think I might read this out loud, and if I don't want to say anything, I'll cut it out. This is a continuation of another page, but I'll read what I can. When I'm alone, it feels like I'm living through the final moments of my life. It has been like this for days, and I don't know how long I have left. Something. I get high and close my eyes. I feel my soul snaking out of my body, and she's holding it desperately and clawing it, forcing it back inside. I think if I tried, I could will myself into death. God is not real. If he was, I would be saved. And then I have one page. This is, Ethel Cain symbolism, and then the entire, what song is this? Pull Drone? Yeah. All the Pull Drone lyrics. And then this deer with, amber waves, lyrics. This was just the start. Yeah. Very short entry. It just says, I have to kill something. I love you, Ani. Not dated. So that's kind of what I'm talking about when I talk about psychosis. It is just all-encompassing. The one I read before was dated January 12th. Yeah. That's kind of what I'm talking about. It just became all-encompassing. Like, it was the only thing I could think about. I also have, like, Spotify playlists that I made during that time. through the lyrics of Pull Drone. Um, it was a whole thing. Um, so I had this mentality of like, yeah, I'm walking upon the final moments of my life. And I was just okay with that. I just didn't know when it was going to happen. I thought like it was going to be completely up to me. I was just going to focus really hard and I was just going to disappear. Um, so I would still get up and go to work. Like I had a cashiering job at that point. So there was a big crash outside. Um, I would go to work, and since I was in this mindset of like everything is an omen, I would have customers come up to my register and just be talking to me, and I would look at them like they were God. Like, genuinely, everybody was an angel. Like, everybody was a fucking prophet. So, I can't tell you the look I had on my face. Like, I'm sure it was crazy. Everybody came up to me and I was like looking at them like everything they said was prophecy. And I truly believed it. I was like, these are my final days. I'm hearing every message I need to hear. And that was deeply what I believed. Um, it was the most, like, reality has never shifted that hard for me before. So living in this new reality was very jarring. And what was interesting was that I was completely okay with it. There was no fear. There was no fear at all. I was just content with the fact that, what was my fact was that I was gonna die. I was simply going to die. Because, as I mentioned in what I read, I felt like I was clawing onto my soul, and at some point I was just gonna have to let go and I would disappear. So, if you want to put yourself in my shoes and like just kind of live in that idea of everybody around you in this new reality is an angel, and they're all trying to talk to you and they're trying to tell you something, and like everybody's trying to convince you that like, yeah, it's time to go. Insane. I couldn't tell you how I broke out of it. I eventually did. And then I looked back and I was like, holy shit, that was psychosis. um it was crazy. It genuinely was crazy. Haven't experienced anything like it since. um Yeah, I even talked to my sister about this kind of thing. So I was like, hey, I was in psychosis for a little bit there, right? And she was like, kinda? Like, she didn't know it was psychosis, but she was like, yeah, you were acting weird. Like, you were being weird for a while. And I was like, well, yeah, I was in psychosis. So anyway, that can happen with BPD because it is a borderline psychotic disorder. Um, Except for me, I did slip into the psychotic part for a little bit. But otherwise, um, there's some stigma around borderline where it's like, never date somebody with borderline, like borderline people are evil. And I just want to say, not all. Have I been a dick? For sure. I don't think anyone alive has not been. Um, we're not evil. We just have a very different experience um, of just this whole emotion thing. So, like, it just requires a lot of patience to be with someone with borderline. It's one of the things I bring up to new people very quickly is like, hey, I have BPD. For your information, it means this. Let me know if I'm ever crossing a line with you, or if I'm doing something weird or wrong or too much, or, you know, because it's all part of my journey as well of just fucking dealing with this. Um, Only thing I can really say that's left is, hey, fuck the people who gave you this condition, if it was, you know, not genetic. Fuck the people who gave me this condition. Fuck everybody for stigmatizing it online. Fuck everybody who plays it up as a cutesy thing to have. 'Cause it fucking isn't. It really is not. I am always exhausted from my own brain. I have trouble seeing reality as it is. I have so much to deal with in my own head all the time. And people like to make it like all cutesy. And it's like, baby, it isn't. It is not cutesy. It is one of the worst disorders you can have. So, if there's anything I missed, I might make a follow-up. This was very, like, unscripted, so I'm sure I missed something. But, in general, that's been my experience. If anybody is watching this who's, like, I think I might have borderline and, like, is relating to anything I say, get, what the fuck is the word? Get diagnosed. Or at least go to a, like, person who can, and, you know, get that done. Even though it is really expensive nowadays. Honestly, like, the diagnosis is worth it, I believe. Because then you can get your pills. I'm not on pills. I will say that. I am unmedicated, pure, willpower getting through life with borderline, which I do not recommend. I am somehow still alive. Not sure how. Honestly, a lot of weed and alcohol, which you shouldn't be doing. But, yeah. Thanks for listening. I don't know how long this went on. I hope this was interesting. Hope this gives you a little insight as to who I am. If you have any questions, let me know. I'm pretty open when it comes to borderline and kind of what it's like living with it. If you do have borderline and you want some coping tips, hit me up. I know a few. That's kind of how I'm still here. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. I hope it was interesting. Hope you learned something. Hope I got you thinking. I don't know. Anyway, thanks for watching. Love you so much. Bye.